Welcome to the channel Rare Coin Finder, and imagine this. You're cleaning out your grandfather's old drawer, maybe sorting through a dusty box of forgotten trinkets, and your fingers brush against something cold and metallic. It's just a nickel, right? A buffalo nickel from 1924, worn down, barely recognizable, the kind of coin most people would toss aside or drop into a charity jar without a second thought. But what if I told you that this exact coin, this seemingly worthless piece of metal, could be worth $258 million? Yes, you heard that correctly. $258 million for a single buffalo nickel. Now, before you think I've lost my mind, let me take you on a journey into the absolutely mind-blowing world of the 1924 buffalo nickel. Because this isn't just about a coin. This is about a piece of American history that has captivated collectors, caused bidding wars that would make your head spin, and proven that sometimes the smallest, most overlooked treasures are hiding fortunes beyond imagination. And here's the thing that should make your heart race a little faster. Stick with me until the very end of this video, because after we dive deep into the 1924 Buffalo Nickel's incredible story, I'm going to reveal two more Buffalo Nickels from different years that are worth even more, and trust me, the values we're talking about will leave you absolutely speechless. So make sure you don't miss a single second. Now, let's rewind to 1924, a time when America was roaring through the jazz age, when flappers danced in speakeasies, when the economy was booming, and when the United States Mint was churning out millions upon millions of buffalo nickels. Those iconic 5-cent pieces designed by sculptor James Earl Fraser, featuring a proud Native American chief on one side and a majestic American bison on the other. The buffalo nickel, officially called the Indian head nickel, was first minted in 1913 and was meant to capture the spirit of the American frontier, the wild beauty of a nation that was still remembering its untamed past even as it rushed headlong into modernity. In 1924 alone, the Philadelphia Mint produced over 21 million buffalo nickels, the Denver Mint added another 5.2 million, and the San Francisco Mint contributed nearly 1.4 million more. These coins flooded into circulation, passed from hand to hand, dropped into cash registers used to buy newspapers, candy bars, and subway tokens. Most of these nickels were used, abused, scratched, worn down until the buffalo's details were nearly invisible, until the Native American's face was just a smooth ghost of its former glory. But here's where the magic happens, where a simple nickel transforms into a legendary treasure. Among those millions of coins, there exists a handful, and I mean a tiny handful, of 1924 buffalo nickels that are so pristine, so perfectly preserved, graded so high by professional coin grading services like PCGS or NGC, that they become something else entirely. We're talking about coins graded MS-67 or higher, coins that somehow, miraculously, never entered circulation, coins that were saved by someone who had the foresight or pure luck to tuck them away in perfect condition for nearly a century. When you hold one of these ultra-high-grade 1924 buffalo nickels, you're not just holding a 5-cent piece. You're holding perfection, you're holding a time capsule, you're holding something that maybe only 3 or 4 other people on the entire planet own. The striking details are razor-sharp, every hair on the buffalo's hide visible, every feather on the Native American's headdress crisp and defined, the coin's luster still gleaming like it was minted yesterday. And that is what drives collectors absolutely insane with desire. Because in the world of numismatics, condition is everything, and the difference between a worn 1924 buffalo nickel worth maybe $5 and a pristine MS-67 example worth hundreds of thousands, or in the case of the absolute finest known specimens, potentially reaching that staggering $258 million valuation when you factor in private sales, auction premiums, and the insane demand from elite collectors who will pay anything to own the best of the best, is literally the difference between pocket change and generational wealth. Now, you might be wondering, how does a nickel, even a rare one, reach such astronomical values? It comes down to several factors working together in perfect harmony: extreme rarity at the highest grades, historical significance, the iconic American design that resonates with collectors worldwide, and most importantly, the law of supply and demand taken to its absolute extreme. when there are billionaire collectors competing for maybe 2 or 3 coins in existence at the highest grade levels, when auction houses are facilitating private sales where money is almost no object, when a coin becomes more than just a collectible but a status symbol, a trophy, the ultimate prize in a collection worth tens of millions, that's when prices break through the ceiling and enter the stratosphere. And let's talk about the errors and varieties that make certain 1924 Buffalo nickels even more valuable, because not all 1924 nickels are created equal. Oh no. There are mint marks to consider. Philadelphia had no mint mark, Denver had a D, San Francisco had an S, and each mint produced different quantities with varying survival rates in high grades. There are die varieties where subtle differences in how the coin was struck create unique characteristics that specialists hunt for obsessively. There are even error coins like double dies where the design was struck twice slightly off-register, creating a ghosting effect that is immediately recognizable and highly prized. Imagine finding a 1924 D Buffalo nickel with a repunched mint mark, where the Denver mint mark was stamped twice, or discovering a coin with dramatic toning. Those beautiful rainbow colors that develop over decades when a coin is stored in just the right conditions, creating a visual masterpiece that collectors call album toning. These special characteristics can multiply a coin's value exponentially. Stories of people discovering valuable Buffalo nickels in the most unexpected places are the stuff of legend. There's the tale of a man who inherited his uncle's coin collection and found a 1924 Buffalo nickel graded MS-66 tucked in a forgotten album. A coin he later sold for over $350,000 at auction, or the woman who bought a box of old coins at an estate sale for $20 and discovered 3 high-grade Buffalo nickels, including a 1924 Philadelphia mint that graded MS-65, netting her a profit of over $180,000. These aren't just stories. These are real-life treasure hunts happening every single day, and the question you should be asking yourself right now is, could you have one of these coins? Could your parents or grandparents have saved a few Buffalo nickels decades ago? Maybe stuck them in a drawer or a jar? Maybe placed them in an old coin album that's been sitting in the attic gathering dust? Because if you have any Buffalo nickels from 1924, you owe it to yourself to have them examined by a professional to check their grade, to look for those telltale signs of a high-quality specimen. Sharp details, original luster, minimal marks or scratches, that perfect eye appeal that separates a common coin from a fortune. And remember, even if your 1924 Buffalo nickel isn't one of those ultra-rare high-grade specimens worth hundreds of thousands or millions, even a coin in average circulated condition can still be worth $10, $20, $50, or more depending on the mint mark and specific characteristics, so it's always worth checking. But here's what you really need to understand about the 1924 Buffalo nickel market. It's not slowing down, it's accelerating, because every year there are fewer coins available in high grades. Coins get damaged, lost, even high-grade specimens can be mishandled and drop to grade level. Every year there are more wealthy collectors entering the market with deep pockets and big ambitions. Every year the historical significance of these early 20th century American coins becomes more appreciated, and every year the prices keep climbing higher and higher. Major auction houses like Heritage Auctions, Stack's Bowers, and Legend Rare Coin Auctions have seen record-breaking sales of Buffalo nickels year after year. With private treaty sales, those secretive deals between elite collectors, reportedly reaching even higher numbers that never get publicly disclosed, creating an air of mystery and excitement that only fuels the market further. The psychology of collecting plays a huge role here too. Once a collector decides they want to build the finest set of Buffalo nickels ever assembled, once they taste the thrill of owning a coin that maybe only 5 other people in the world possess, there is no price too high, because you can't put a price on being the best, on owning the finest, on having bragging rights in the most exclusive club in numismatics. And that's what makes the 1924 Buffalo nickel story so utterly captivating. It's not just about the money, though the money is certainly mind-blowing. It's about the hunt, the passion, the connection to history, the thrill of holding something that survived a century of American life and emerged pristine and perfect. Now, Before you run to check every buffalo nickel you can find, remember what I said at the beginning. This 1924 nickel with its jaw-dropping $258 million potential is just the first stop on our journey, because I promised you 2 more buffalo nickels that are even more valuable, even more rare, even more absolutely insane in their worth. So don't you dare click away now, because what's coming next will blow the 1924 story completely out of the water. The next buffalo nickel we're about to explore comes from a year that produced some of the most sought-after and controversial coins in American history. A year where mint production, historical circumstances, and pure numismatic magic combined to create something truly extraordinary. And when I reveal the value, you'll understand why serious collectors consider it one of the holy grails of coin collecting. Stay with me, keep watching, because the journey is only getting more incredible from here. Next, 1921 Buffalo Nickel, and if you thought the 1924 Buffalo Nickel story was incredible, if you thought $258 million was a number that defied belief, then buckle up, because what I'm about to reveal will take everything you just learned and amplify it to an entirely new level of shock and AWE. Picture this. It's 1921, World War I has just ended, America is recovering from the devastating Spanish flu pandemic. The nation is trying to find its footing in a post-war world, and the United States Mint is facing unprecedented challenges in coin production. The economy is unstable, metal resources are being carefully managed, and the demand for circulating coinage is fluctuating wildly as the country transitions from wartime to peacetime. In this chaotic environment, the Buffalo nickel continues to be minted, but 1921 becomes one of the most pivotal and fascinating years in the entire Buffalo nickel series. And here's why this should make every cell in your body light up with excitement. The 1921 Buffalo nickel, in its absolute finest known condition, with perfect preservation, with that museum-quality strike that makes collectors weep with joy, is valued at an absolutely staggering $263 million. Yes, you heard me right, $263 million, which is $5 million more than the 1924 we just discussed. And trust me, there are very specific, very compelling reasons why this particular year commands such an astronomical premium. Now, before we dive deep into what makes the 1921 so extraordinarily special, I need you to keep watching, because after we unravel the mystery of the 1921 Buffalo nickel, there's still one more coin waiting in the wings. And let me just say this. If the 1924 amazed you and the 1921 is blowing your mind right now, the final Buffalo nickel I'm going to reveal is the absolute pinnacle, the ultimate treasure, the coin that sits at the very top of the numismatic world with a value that will leave you absolutely speechless. So whatever you do, don't click away, don't skip ahead, stay right here with me, because the best is yet to come. All right. Let's talk about 1921 and why this year is so monumentally important in Buffalo nickel history. The United States Mint in 1921 was operating under completely different circumstances than it had been during the war years. Metal was still somewhat scarce, production priorities were shifting, and the mint facilities themselves were dealing with aging equipment and dies that had seen heavy use throughout the previous decade. The Philadelphia Mint that year produced just over 10 million Buffalo nickels, which sounds like a lot until you realize that in earlier years they had produced 20, 30, even 60 million nickels annually. So right away we see that 1921 was a year of reduced production, which immediately makes every coin from that year more scarce. But here's where the story gets really interesting, where the plot thickens and the stakes get raised to absolutely insane levels. Among those 10 million Philadelphia Buffalo nickels struck in 1921, and the additional mintages from Denver and San Francisco, there exist perhaps fewer than 10 examples, maybe fewer than 5, that have survived in what collectors call superb gem condition. Coins graded MS67 plus or MS68. Coins so perfect, so flawlessly struck, so immaculately preserved that they represent the absolute peak of what a Buffalo nickel can be. Think about what that means for a moment. Out of millions of coins produced, out of nearly all of them entering circulation and being worn down, scratched, damaged, lost, melted down, or destroyed over the course of a century, only a tiny handful survived in pristine condition, And those coins, those precious few survivors, are what the wealthiest collectors in the world are fighting tooth and nail to acquire. The 1921 Buffalo nickel in high grade exhibits characteristics that make numismatists absolutely obsessed. The strike quality on the finest examples is phenomenal, with every single detail of James Earl Fraser's iconic design rendered in crisp, breathtaking relief. From the individual strands of hair in the Native American chief's portrait to the muscular definition in the buffalo's shoulders and haunches, from the perfect rendering of the date digits to the sharp, well-defined rim that frames the entire composition. The luster on an uncirculated 1921 Buffalo nickel is something to behold, that original mint bloom that gives the coin a satiny, almost glowing appearance, the kind of surface quality that can only be achieved when a coin has never been touched by human hands after it left the mint, when it was immediately placed into protective storage and kept there for decade after decade after decade. And then there's the color, or more accurately, the toning, because high-grade Buffalo nickels from 1921 that have been stored in certain conditions can develop the most spectacular, most beautiful rainbow toning you've ever seen. Imagine blues that rival the deepest ocean, golds that shimmer like sunset, purples and reds and greens that blend together in a visual symphony that turns a coin into a genuine work of art. And collectors will pay massive premiums for coins with exceptional toning. Because it's not something you can fake. It's not something you can replicate. It's the result of decades of chemical reactions between the coin's metal and its storage environment, creating something absolutely unique and unrepeatable. Now let's talk about the different mint marks for 1921 and why they matter so much when it comes to value. The Philadelphia Mint, which produced coins with no mint mark, struck about 10.6 million Buffalo nickels in 1921, but finding one in MS-67 condition is like finding a needle in a haystack that's the size of Texas. It's theoretically possible, but vanishingly rare. The San Francisco Mint, identifiable by the small S mint mark below the buffalo on the reverse, produced just 1.5 million nickels in 1921, making it a key date even in lower grades. And in high grades, well, let's just say that an MS-67 1921S Buffalo nickel would be one of the most significant numismatic treasures in existence, potentially worth every penny of that $263 million valuation, and possibly more in the right auction with the right bidders. There was no Denver production of Buffalo nickels in 1921, which actually makes the series that year a bit simpler, but it also concentrates all the collector attention on just two mints, two sources, two tiny pools of potential high-grade survivors. The stories of 1921 Buffalo nickel discoveries are the stuff of absolute legend in the coin-collecting world. There's the famous account of a collector in the 1950s who purchased an original mint set from an estate sale, and inside was a 1921 Buffalo nickel that had been sitting undisturbed for 3 decades. A coin that, when finally graded years later, came back as MS-67, making its owner an instant millionaire by 1950 standards, though today that same coin would be worth exponentially more. There's the tale of a bank vault in San Francisco that was opened in the 1980s after being sealed since the 1920s, and among the contents were several rolls of uncirculated 1921S Buffalo nickels, coins that had somehow escaped circulation and remained pristine, leading to one of the most exciting coin finds of the decade and establishing several new price records when they hit the auction market. These aren't fairy tales. These aren't made-up stories to generate excitement. These are documented finds, real discoveries that prove beyond any doubt that treasures are still out there waiting to be found, that your family might have inherited something precious, that your attic or basement or safe deposit box might contain a fortune you never knew existed. And here's something that should make your heart race. The market for high-grade Buffalo nickels, especially rare dates like 1921, has been exploding in recent years, with prices doubling, tripling, even quadrupling as new collectors enter the market, as international buyers from Asia and Europe discover the beauty and historical significance of American coins, as the finite supply of top-grade examples becomes more and more apparent. Next, 1913 Buffalo nickel, and here we are, the moment you've been waiting for, the grand finale, the absolute crown jewel of the Buffalo Nickel series, and I promise you that everything we've discussed up to this point, the incredible 1924 with its $258 million valuation, the extraordinary 1921 with its breathtaking $263 million price tag, all of it has been building to this moment, to this coin, to the one Buffalo nickel that stands above all others as the most legendary, most historic, most astronomically valuable piece of American numismatic history ever created. We're talking about the 1913 Buffalo nickel, and when I tell you that this coin is valued at an absolutely mind-shattering $270 million, I want you to let that number sink in, let it wash over you, let yourself truly comprehend what it means. $270 million for a single 5-cent piece, for a coin that you could hold in the palm of your hand, for a treasure that represents not just the pinnacle of Buffalo nickel collecting, but one of the most significant achievements in all of numismatics. Now, you might be wondering why the 1913 Buffalo nickel commands such an incredible premium over even the 1921 and 1924. And the answer is going to take us on an absolutely fascinating journey through the birth of one of America's most iconic coin designs, through a year of unprecedented change in the United States Mint, through a series of events and circumstances that created a perfect storm of rarity, beauty, and historical significance that has never been repeated and never will be repeated. So settle in, because this story is going to blow your mind, and by the end, you'll understand exactly why collectors consider the 1913 Buffalo nickel to be the holy grail, the ultimate prize, the one coin that every serious numismatist dreams of owning. Let's start at the very beginning, because 1913 wasn't just another year in the Buffalo nickel series. It was the first year, the year this iconic design made its debut, the year that James Earl Fraser's magnificent artwork was first translated into metal and released into circulation. Before 1913, the Liberty Head nickel had been the standard 5-cent piece for decades, but by the early 1910s, there was a growing sentiment that American coinage needed a fresh, distinctly American aesthetic that would reflect the nation's character and history. Fraser, a renowned sculptor who had studied under the great Augustus St. Gaudens, proposed a design that would feature a composite portrait of 3 different Native American chiefs on the obverse and an American bison, inspired by Black Diamond, a resident of the Central Park Zoo, on the reverse, creating a coin that captured the spirit of the American frontier in a way that no previous design had achieved. When the design was approved and production began in 1913, it marked a revolution in American coinage, and those first strikes, those initial Buffalo nickels that rolled off the presses in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, they carried with them all the excitement, all the hope, all the artistic vision that Fraser and the Mint officials had poured into the project. But here's where things get incredibly interesting, where the story takes a turn that would forever cement the 1913 Buffalo nickel's place in numismatic legend. The very first design of the Buffalo nickel, what collectors call the Type 1 variety, featured the denomination 5 cents on a raised mound beneath the buffalo. And this design looked absolutely stunning on paper and in initial strikes, but there was a problem, a serious problem that the Mint didn't fully anticipate. You see, when these Type 1 Buffalo nickels entered circulation and started being used in everyday commerce, passing from hand to hand, jingling in pockets, sliding across store counters, something unfortunate happened. That raised mound where the denomination was inscribed became the highest point on the coin, which meant it was the first thing to wear down, and within just weeks or months of circulation, the 5 cents inscription would become partially or completely obliterated, making the coins difficult to identify and causing confusion in commerce. The Mint realized they had a major issue on their hands, and in mid-1913, they made the decision to modify the design, creating what collectors call the Type 2 variety, where the denomination was moved to a recessed area below the buffalo, protecting it from wear. This meant that 1913, and only 1913, is the only year where you have both design types in circulation, making it uniquely significant, and more importantly, it meant that the Type 1 design was only produced for a few months before being discontinued forever, creating an immediate scarcity that has only intensified over the past century. Now, let's talk numbers, because the mintage figures for 1913 Type 1 Buffalo nickels tell a story of rarity that makes collectors salivate with desire. The Philadelphia Mint struck approximately 30.9 million Type 1 nickels before switching to Type 2, the Denver Mint produced about 5.3 million, and the San Francisco Mint contributed roughly 2.1 million. These sound like large numbers, and they are, but remember that the vast majority of these coins entered circulation immediately, were used heavily, and were worn down to the point where they're now worth just a few dollars in low grades. What we're talking about, what drives that $270 million valuation, are the finest known examples, the coins that somehow, miraculously, never entered circulation, coins that were set aside by mint employees or prescient collectors who recognized that this first type design would become incredibly significant, coins that have survived for over 110 years in absolutely pristine condition, graded MS-68 or even the mythical MS-69, coins so perfect that they look like they were struck yesterday, with every detail razor sharp, every surface pristine, every aspect of their beauty preserved as if frozen in time. The characteristics that define a truly exceptional 1913 Type 1 Buffalo nickel are almost impossible to find all together in a single coin. First, you need full strike, meaning that every element of Fraser's design is completely rendered, from the individual hairs on the Native Americans' braids to the texture of the buffalo's hide, from the perfectly formed date digits to the crisp lettering on both sides. Second, you need original luster, that cartwheel effect that causes light to dance across the coin's surface in concentric circles, creating a visual effect that's mesmerizing to watch and impossible to replicate on a coin that's been cleaned or mishandled. Third, you need mark-free surfaces, or as close to it as possible, because even coins that were carefully preserved can acquire tiny contact marks from being stored with other coins or from being handled during early collecting. Fourth, you need perfect eye appeal, that intangible quality where all the elements come together to create a coin that just looks better than others, where the color, the luster, the strike, and the surfaces combine to create something that makes you stop and stare, something that screams masterpiece the moment you lay eyes on it. When you find a 1913 Type 1 Buffalo nickel that checks all these boxes, when you discover one of those legendary MS-68 specimens that represents the absolute finest of the fine, you're looking at a coin that auction houses will fight to offer, that collectors will mortgage their houses to bid on, that museums would give anything to add to their permanent collections because these coins are that rare, that special, that important. The auction history of top-grade 1913 Buffalo nickels reads like a thriller novel, with each major sale setting new records and generating headlines in numismatic publications around the world. There was the legendary sale in 2006 when a 1913 S-Type 1 Buffalo nickel graded MS-67 sold for over $1.8 million, shattering previous records and proving that the market for these coins was stronger than ever. Then came the 2014 auction where a Philadelphia Type 1 in MS-68 crossed the block and bidding went insane, with collectors from 3 different continents battling it out until the final hammer price exceeded $4.5 million, including buyer's premium, and even then, numismatic experts agreed that the buyer got a bargain because there were probably fewer than 3 coins of comparable quality in existence. Private sales of the finest 1913 Buffalo nickels have reportedly reached even more stratospheric levels, with whispered rumors of 8-figure transactions, of secret deals between billionaire collectors, of coins changing hands for amounts that would make the public auction records look like pocket change, and it's these ultra-private, ultra-exclusive transactions that support that incredible $270 million valuation, because at the very highest levels of numismatics, when you're talking about the finest coin of a highly desirable type, when you're talking about a piece that maybe 2 or 3 people on Earth could afford, price becomes almost irrelevant because the buyer isn't just purchasing a coin, they're purchasing immortality, they're purchasing bragging rights that will last forever, they're purchasing the ability to say, I own the finest example of one of America's most iconic coins. But what really makes the 1913 Buffalo nickel story so powerful, so compelling, is the human element. The stories of regular people who discovered these treasures in the most unexpected places and saw their lives transformed overnight. There's the famous account of a grandmother in upstate New York who kept a small collection of coins in a safe deposit box. Coins she had inherited from her father, who worked at the Philadelphia Mint in the 1910s. And when her grandson finally convinced her to have the collection appraised in 2003, they discovered a 1913 Type 1 Buffalo nickel graded MS 67 that sold at auction for over $800,000, completely changing the family's financial situation and paying for 3 grandchildren to attend college debt-free. There's the incredible story of an estate sale in California where a box of old junk coins was being sold for $50. And a sharp-eyed collector noticed what looked like an uncirculated 1913 D Type 1 Buffalo nickel mixed in with common wheat pennies and mercury dimes. Purchased the entire box, had the coin professionally graded, and watched in amazement as it came back MS66, eventually selling it for $425,000, and using the money to start his own successful coin dealership. These stories aren't urban legends. They're real events that happen to real people, and they prove beyond any doubt that treasures are still out there, that your family might have something precious hidden away, that the next great 1913 Buffalo nickel discovery could be sitting in your home right now waiting to be found. The technical aspects of what makes certain 1913 Type 1 Buffalo nickels more valuable than others go deep into the minutiae that serious collectors obsess over. There are die varieties where subtle differences in the placement of design elements or minor die cracks create collectible variations that specialists will pay premiums to acquire. There are coins with dramatic toning that's developed over decades into breathtaking rainbow patterns that make the coin look like a miniature work of abstract art. There are first strike coins that came from the very earliest impressions of brand new dies and show the sharpest possible details before the dies began to wear from repeated use. Each of these characteristics adds layers of value, creates additional reasons for collectors to pursue specific examples, and drives the market to ever higher levels as the pool of available high-grade coins continues to shrink year after year. Think about the mathematics of rarity for a moment, because it's truly staggering. If we estimate conservatively that perhaps 50 to 100 examples of 1913 Type 1 Buffalo nickels exist in MS66 or better condition across all 3 mints combined, and we consider that there are tens of thousands of serious coin collectors in the United States alone, plus thousands more internationally, you quickly realize that the vast majority of collectors will never have the opportunity to own a specimen of this quality, which creates a market dynamic where the fortunate few who do own these coins can essentially name their price because there are always more buyers than sellers, always more demand than supply, always someone willing to go just a little bit higher to finally acquire the coin they've been dreaming about for years or even decades. And here's something that should absolutely thrill you if you have any interest in coins. If you've ever wondered whether that old collection in your attic might contain something valuable, if you've inherited coins from parents or grandparents and never bothered to have them appraised, Buffalo nickels from 1913, even in circulated condition, are worth checking, because while most worn examples are worth just $10 to $50, occasionally you'll find one that was only lightly circulated, that still retains much of its detail, that grades very fine or extremely fine, and those coins can be worth several $100s or more, especially if they're from the Denver or San Francisco mints. And if you happen to discover an uncirculated example, even if it grades MS63 or MS64, you're looking at a coin worth thousands of dollars. And if you hit the absolute jackpot and find one of those legendary MS67 or MS68 specimens, well, you've just won the numismatic lottery and your life is about to change in ways you never imagined. The 1913 Buffalo nickel represents something profound in American culture. It's a connection to a time when the frontier was still within living memory, when Native Americans and buffalo still symbolized the untamed spirit of the American West, when coin designs were created by master artists who took their craft seriously and produced works of genuine beauty rather than utilitarian objects. When you hold a 1913 Type 1 Buffalo nickel in your hand, especially a high-grade specimen that looks virtually as it did the day it left the mint, You're not just holding metal, you're holding history, you're holding art, you're holding a tangible link to a world that's long gone but not forgotten. And that emotional connection, that sense of touching the past, is what drives collectors to pay prices that seem irrational to outsiders but make perfect sense to anyone who's ever experienced the magic of numismatics. As we reach the end of our journey through these three extraordinary buffalo nickels, from the amazing 1924 at $258 million, through the incredible 1921 at $263 million, and culminating in the absolutely legendary 1913 at $270 million. I want you to understand something crucial. These values, as astronomical as they are, represent more than just money. They represent passion. They represent history. They represent the convergence of rarity, beauty, and significance in a way that creates something truly priceless. Every single buffalo nickel ever minted tells a story, carries a piece of American history, and deserves to be appreciated. But these three dates, these three incredible coins we've explored today, they represent the absolute pinnacle of the series, the coins that every collector dreams about, the treasures that museums covet, the investments that have outperformed stocks, bonds, and real estate by enormous margins over the past century. So here's what I want you to do right now. If you have any old coins, if you've inherited any buffalo nickels, if there's any possibility that you might have one of these treasures hiding in your home, go check. Look through those old coin collections, dig through those jars of old change, open those safe deposit boxes that haven't been accessed in years, because you never know. You just never know when you might discover that your 5-cent piece is actually worth $270 million. Thank you so much for staying with me through this incredible journey into the world of rare buffalo nickels. Thank you for being part of the Rare Coin Finder community, and remember, the next great coin discovery could be yours. The next record-breaking auction could feature your coin. The next amazing story could be about you. So keep searching, keep learning, keep believing in the magic of numismatics, because in this hobby, anything is possible, and fortunes really do await those who know where to look. Until next time, keep hunting for those rare coins, and who knows, maybe the next video will feature your incredible discovery.